Welcome to Reach for Healing. I'm Rebecca, and I wanted to stop by tonight to share a story with you that I had forgotten. It's a story from about 6.5 years ago, almost 7 years ago. And I was reminded of that story this morning as I was hanging out with some of my tribe. And I wanted to stop by and share this with you all because I think it's one of those stories that highlights how we can use metaphysical spiritual principles to help us even in things that seem A, impossible, and B, maybe too mundane to bother the divine with. So here's my story. In my previous job, I was, for lack of a better description, a consultant. I worked from home and I would travel often to Kansas City, Missouri, and also to Boston, Massachusetts. And it was January or February in early 2014. And snow was predicted for the central part of the United States. It was supposed to be a pretty significant snowstorm, but I was scheduled that week to fly to Kansas City and to spend a few days on site for some meetings. I remember sitting on the tarmac and being feeling a little trepidation about going ahead with this because you never know. I didn't really want to get stuck in a hotel during a snowstorm in Kansas, but I had no other information at that time, and so I kinda had to proceed until apprehended. So I'm sitting in my seat on the airplane. I flew enough that I always had good seats in business class, and, just then the email, right as they shut the door and started to back out, of the terminal there, I got the email that said they were encouraging everyone to work from home because of a predicted 4 to 8 inches of snow. Whatever, at that point, you're kinda committed on the plane unless you want to have an up close and personal chat with an air marshal, which I did not. So I thought worst case scenario, I go out to Kansas City, I have some great Kansas City barbecue and I come back home in a couple days. So I land in Kansas City, there's no snow in sight yet. Maybe it was cold, maybe a few flakes, but nothing terrible. I pick up my rental car, I go to my hotel, I check in for the night. The next morning, there was snow everywhere. It was crazy. Probably a good 4 inches, 6 inches had fallen overnight. So I get up, I go into the office. People are calling off, not coming in. There were a handful of people in the office. My team was there. We went ahead and had we started our meeting. It was kind of a strategic planning session, I believe. And we started our meeting and we actually got a lot of good work done. But by noon, I had another 4 inches of snow on my rental car and the office was closing down. So I left, and we all left. I headed back to my hotel room and suddenly realized that not only was I not going to be able to get around a whole lot in my small front wheel drive rental car, but the restaurants in town were sending everyone home. I mean, this Kansas City was shutting down. It was actually Leawood, Kansas. It was shutting down. I had a bag of pretzels from the hotel store, a couple bottles of water, a small yogurt, and that was it. There was no Kansas City barbecue happening in in this stay. Now, the other thing that's important to understand about this is in this job, I had been flying a lot. And the last few trips that I had taken, I ended up being delayed. My flights ended up being delayed. And I spent a lot of time in airports, not getting home till midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And my dad would always pick me up at the airport, and sometimes my son if it was too late. And that was just starting to get kind of difficult for people to come out to the airport at those very late hours. You schedule your flight, you think you'll be home by 9, 9:30, and it ends up being 1 in the morning. Not pleasant. So before I had left on this particular or even before this particular trip, I'd been working with my minister at the Center for Spiritual Living and asking her to do spiritual mind treatment so that my flights were on time. And they had started to straighten out. I was having fewer and fewer really late night flights. So that's just kind of the backdrop there. So I'm stuck here in this Snowmageddon, and they were calling it Snowmageddon on the news. In fact, in the nightly news, in all the newscasts, they were featuring Kansas as the middle of this Snowmageddon, snowpocalypse, and whatever that it was called. So I'm in my hotel room, and my minister emailed me to see how I was, and we were chatting back and forth. And I said, I need I need help. I need to be able to get home tomorrow. There's 14 inches of snow out there. Everything's shut down. I don't want to be stranded. So she said, don't worry about it. I'll do a treatment, a spiritual mind treatment, which in some of my blog posts and other writings I have described as affirmative prayer. Joseph Murphy called it prayer therapy, whatever you want to call it. She said she would do affirmative prayer, a spiritual mind treatment for me, and to get up the next day and to go to the airport as if I was leaving on time and not to give any thought to anything different happening. So I did. I get up the next day, did what I had to do for work, packed my bags, got in the car, left a little early because of all of the snow. I wasn't that familiar with the roads out there in Kansas, so wanted to make, and it wasn't my car; it was a rental, so wanted to make sure that I didn't have to go faster than normal to get to the airport. So I make it to the airport. I drop off the rental car, I take the shuttle back to the terminal. I always check in online, so I was dropping my checked bag off and showing the agent at the counter my pre-printed boarding pass, on my phone, my pre-established boarding pass. And I had handed over my bag and was about to turn around, and the agent said, Excuse me, ma'am, I have a flight that leaves for Chicago in 45 minutes. Your current flight is actually delayed by more than 2 hours and may not even get to leave Chicago. If you'd like, I've got this one seat on this other flight that'll take you to Pittsburgh through Chicago. I can check your bag all the way through to Pittsburgh. Shouldn't be a problem. I said, Yes, ma'am. Took her a couple minutes to reissue the boarding pass and print one. I took it, wound my way through. Kansas City Airport is pretty small, so wound my way over to the area to get in line, and was on the plane and in the air with no difficulty. I landed in Chicago O'Hare with more than 2 hours to spare before my flight to Pittsburgh. And my flight to Pittsburgh took off on time and landed as scheduled in Pittsburgh at 9:31 p.m. Now, what you have to understand is that the next day in the newspaper and on all the local stations, they had reported how many flights were canceled or delayed extensively that day. And somehow, in the midst of all this, I ended up being in the right place at the right time for one open seat on a flight that got me to Chicago in time to catch my connecting flight, which was then on time home to Pittsburgh. Now, that doesn't seem like a major miracle, perhaps, to some of you, but I can tell you that when I was traveling a lot, there is nothing worse than being exhausted and really ready to go home and being stuck in an airport. I mean, they don't have cots for you to sleep in. You're sitting upright in a chair that's not very comfortable. And I'm to that point where I need my sleep. So I really wanted to be home on time. This is the experience that I've had over and over and over applying the principles of spiritual metaphysics. And it's why I have been passionate about writing and keeping my blog for almost 7 years now, and why I've moved into doing these mini lessons on YouTube. I know that these principles work, and I know that when they're applied, things happen. And so I just wanted to stop by and share that with you all this evening. If you have a curiosity or other questions and you want to read more about some of my wild adventures in spiritual metaphysics, I encourage you to stop by my blog, practitionerspath.wordpress.com. And I hope you'll keep coming back here to Reach for Healing for more. Until next time, take care.